From the Buddha. Thus should you look upon this changing world. All component things are impermanent. All component things are subject to dissolution. See all of this world as a star at dawn, a bubble in a stream, a flash of lightning in a summer cloud, a flickering lamp, a phantom, and a dream. Thus should we look upon this changing world. All component things are impermanent. All component things are subject to dissolution. See all of this world as a star at dawn, a bubble in a stream, a flash of lightning in a summer cloud, a flickering lamp, a phantom, and a dream. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to PIMC. Looks like a few of you are here for the first time. Would you raise your hand? Oh my goodness, more than a few. Well, you've come either intentionally or by accident to a rather unusual morning here, in that I guess this is the first time in 3 years we've done a refuge ceremony. And I'll be explaining what that is. And thank you, Michael. We could just have people force them to come up to the front if they get here late. The 3 refuges are in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And I'll speak a little bit about them. Some of us had a 4-hour retreat/class yesterday on this. But refuge in Sangha has to do with taking refuge in community. And taking refuge means finding a place of support or solace or stability in the midst of this world, which is absolutely out of control. So one way to think of it is simply that we really need each other. The spiritual journey isn't, except for very rare hermit types, it isn't really doable without each other. Because sometimes it gets really, really hard. And sometimes doubt, we're doing our archaeological journey with the spiritual practice, and we hit these pressurized pockets, like gas pockets of doubt. And when doubt erupts, pretty hard to practice, if not impossible. Because why would you practice? Because none of this makes any sense. And so that's when we really, and one of the times when we really need each other. we also need each other from the moment of our birth until the moment of our death, just to support each other, just to help us get enough food and shelter. And we are utterly dependent on, this morning we were dependent upon millions of people, actually, and are. Sometimes, whenever I think in this way, I somehow or another, I guess I know the association's back, but I like to thank the people that are in the natural gas pumping stations, wherever they are. And there's a lot of them right now that are sitting there in front of their dials so that our furnace works. And that's just the tiniest tip of the iceberg. So, there's also an historical component. Siddhartha Gautama, an ordinary human being like us, who set off on quite a quest and succeeded, and then remarkably understood how he had the experience he had of waking up, and then figured out how to teach it and share it. And so that's been passed down to us now over 2,600 years. Student to teacher, or teacher to student. 120 to 150 generations, depending upon how we count a generation. So it's, in a way, not very long ago. Certainly in planetary time, it's an eye blink. Even in terms of human, quote, civilization. My favorite factoid is that for 99.96, right, that leaves 0.04. For 99.96% of our time as human beings with this brain, we lived in small hunting and gathering bands of 50 or less. And the old among us were 25 to 30. And that 0.04% begins with Mesopotamia. And the Buddha came along halfway from there, as did Zoroaster, Mahavir, Jesus, Muhammad, another 700 years longer than that later. So this waking up process, this capacity of awakening in a systematic way, is very new. It is time tested, though. I think 150 generations is pretty good. It's pretty good research. And there were, of course, people waking up since the beginning, shamans and beings who realized who we really are and what we really are, including but not limited to this separate self. So that's the refuge in Sangha, is realizing, I can lean on others and others can lean on me. That's part of the purpose of PIMC, is to create a community of practice from cradle to grave. And this is new. This is a first generation Dharma center. My teaching, my encounter with the Dharma began in India back in 1971. So it's an experiment, and it's pretty potent. So in honor of community, I invite you to turn to a neighbor or two and share your name and maybe a hand clasp, if you want to go that far. And tell them one thing you really like about yourself or your life. Wow. That reminded me of the rain the other night. I turned off Macadam onto Taylor's Ferry on my way home, and the water coming down Taylor's Ferry was 4 inches deep. It was quite something. It actually was a little frightening. I was like, whoa, what have we done? So, the Buddha flamed into life in northeastern India. Within a few hundred years, his teachings had spread throughout the Indian subcontinent, thanks to Emperor Ashoka, and to Sri Lanka. They had then gone west through what's now Pakistan and into Afghanistan, over the mountains into Mongolia and what is now Tibet and China. When the Buddhist teachings encountered the Bon tradition, which is extant today in Tibet, it became Tibetan Buddhism, which is where the prayer flags and horns and shamanism and so came into Tibetan practice. It then went into China, where it became Chan, C-H-A'-A-N is our transliteration. A little while later, it jumped the straits to Japan, where Chan became Tsin. When Buddhism entered China, it took 200 years, but it became one of the 3 sponsored national religions. The first was Taoism, Confucianism, Taoism by night, Confucianism by day, basically. And then, music. And then the word Chan is the point of this speaking right now. Chan translates as the sitters, those who sit. Hence this archetypal image up here, sitting. And this central practice of this tradition, which is a ritual that we do together, or apart and together, which is to sit, to just sit and watch the show, which means to stop being actively engaged outwards and to turn inward. Not that we then neglect our outward capacities, but we follow the pattern which has been central to all spiritual traditions, really, which is the pattern of withdrawal and return. 40 days and 40 nights, and this going to the mountain and so on. To stop, to turn inward, which then prepares us, which then allows us to connect with something of a different order, which then we bring into the world and we act from that. So let's sit together. And we can assume a special posture. I use this wonderful balance chair because it's the most ergonomic way to possibly sit upright like this. Sitting cross-legged for some people really works. Some people struggle with it for years, thinking it's the ultimate spiritual position. It's just a way of sitting. The Buddha sat cross-legged because he was from India. If he'd come from Bolivia or Bali or the places where people squat, you'd all be squatting and thinking, oh, those stupid cross-legged people, they don't know the true spiritual position is squatting. The true spiritual practice position is every position. Sitting, standing, walking, lying down, driving, everywhere. So, to find an upright, comfortable upright posture, please don't leave because of little baby noises. If we can't deal with little baby noises, how can we possibly deal with the cacophony in our own minds? So we sit here and we can notice the body is touching the chair or the floor or the cushion. We notice that it breathes. We are the earth breathing. Outside, the trees are the earth breathing in a different way. They produce oxygen and need carbon dioxide. We are the recipients of their largesse, in that we need oxygen. And there are sounds we hear. This voice coming out of nowhere, a baby's cry, perhaps some traffic. Our task is not to silence the mind. It's to wake up, to notice what the mind is doing. To observe the mind as we observe weather. So where is it in this temporary home called the body that you experience sensations that arise from breathing? Let that be your point of orientation. Most likely, you discover that the mind, which has a mind of its own, wanders off into the past and future, into thinking and planning, desiring or disliking, restlessness, dullness, sleepiness, doubting, or the whole spectrum of emotional and mood experiences. The fact that the mind does this is not a failure. It's human nature. It's nature. sounds come out of nowhere. And then they disappear. Anicca, the holy law. We can attend to breathing in a very superficial way, in which it actually seems as though breathing and thinking happen simultaneously. The awareness of breathing and thinking. We can refine the awareness by attending to notice that between the breaths there's often a pause. And then before any movement happens, there's a kind of hunger, or there's no word for it, but it's like a wanting to breathe. It's in the body. Physiologically, it's the buildup of carbon dioxide sets off some need to breathe in. What happens when the baby's born? When we were born, there's that oxygen deficiency, and then so we can be present for the very first beginnings of a breath, and then be with it through its entire lifetime of growing and coming to greater and greater fullness in the chest. And then comes the moment of direction change, and then decreasing and deflating, and then gone. if we take the goal of our practice to be awake to what's happening, then there's no experience, inner or outer, which is our enemy. This is from the outset the practice of ahimsa, nonviolence. It's quite natural and inevitable that the unpleasant experiences are experienced as aversive. That's part of what's kept us alive. But awareness is much more potent and vastly greater than aversion, or pain, or discomfort, or pleasure. And so one could say we take refuge in being awake, in knowing what's happening, in cultivating, in the words of Ajahn Chah, great Thai master of the last century, cultivating the one who knows, that which knows. One could call this practice of awakening, reverting to awareness, as the practice of refuge in the Buddha. To develop this habit of remembering to be aware is the path of liberation. in honor and recognition of the Sangha, Refuge in the Sangha community, in relatedness, I'm going to guide us in a practice this morning which I always do on retreats, but only rarely here in the Dharma Hall. And the first instruction is, as I share this, what we're going to do, if it is the wrong thing for you to do right now, please empower yourself to not do it. There's a kind of tyranny that can happen in groups. It's kind of mass craziness sometimes, which is that you better do this, or I better do this, or I won't get enlightened, or I better not do this. If I don't do this, I won't be part of the group. You are part of the group. You're here. It's also not magic. I don't really believe much in magic, except awareness, which is pretty miraculous. So if you choose not to do this, I invite you, when someone comes to you to help you up, that you just put your hand over your heart. So, it goes like this. I'm going to put on a beautiful piece of music, which is by Jennifer Berzon, with whom I've communicated, and she's delighted that we use her music in this way. It'll start, and I'm going to come and help maybe 3 people up. And then I'd like those 3 to help 3 more up, and we'll very quickly, remarkably, all be up. It's like the flu virus. Gets into a population and everybody's got it. But it's not a flu virus. So, then we'll all be standing. And then I invite you to turn to a partner, turn to another human being, and to take your hands and let them rise with your left palm up and your right palm down, to make contact and know that you're making contact, right? This is the beginning of a relationship. Contact, and then let your eyes come up and meet and see what happens. For some people this is really pleasant, for others it's anxiety provoking. What a useful thing to know. And notice that each person you meet, with each person you meet, there's a different experience because they have a different atmosphere. It's a Sufi term. And then, once you've met, say these very simple words. I see you. You'll recognize these words from the movie Avatar, from the blue people, and they created that culture on the basis of the Bushmen of the Kalahari. And when they greet each other, they say, I see you coming from afar, and are you hungry? So, and this is in a way, a very advanced insight meditation practice, because it has to do with meeting. It also has to do with noticing something utterly remarkable, which we can all do right now, which is please become aware that you're seeing. A moment ago there was seeing, and now there's an added piece of information, which is knowing of seeing. How does that happen? Or knowing of hearing, or, and where it goes is, knowing of thought, knowing of mood, knowing of the story of personality that you tell yourself, knowing when the mind is in the past, knowing when mind is in the future. And that's that movement, that's the refuge in the Buddha. That's waking up. So, not that we're going to remember all those bits, but to be aware, reaching up, touching, opening, seeing, I see you, and then the person reciprocates. So from Jennifer Bearzon, this is a beautiful loving kindness chant. And please do empower yourself to stay sitting if you want. That's interesting. Anicca, the sacred law. How the heck did that happen? Hope it doesn't do it again. Oh, I see. Funny, huh? Is shuffle lit up or not? We'll see. Three. Three. Oh, don't do the greeting yet. Just let's get everybody up first. And other than the greeting, let's maintain silence. So to greet one another with, I see you. So now we know what to do when we're at a boring cocktail party talking about sports scores or politics. We can always just clink on a glass and say, I have an idea. Let's just greet one another and discover that we're not separate. I'm going to ask the folks who were here yesterday to bear with me on this because this story seems very important to me. Very brief form of it. A long time ago, I was in the Wallowa Mountains with my children and their mother. My daughter was 3, my son was 7.5. We had 2 llamas, yamas, and we were heading into the mountains. And close to the middle, Eagle Cap is the mountain, about close in, deep in, a day and a half into the mountains, all of a sudden the weather changed badly and it turned black. And a big storm was coming and the temperature dropped about 20 degrees and I had a decision to make. Do we pull out the tent and get under a big tree and bivouac and just make it through this? Or do we make a beeline for a historic cabin which was on the map, which was about a quarter mile away? And I made the decision to head for the cabin. And we did, and we just made it, and we just got in, and all hell broke loose. It was a giant thunderstorm, and kind of 1/2 to 3/4 inch hail. And I got them under cover, and then I got the llamas taken care of, and then I went back inside, and we set up the tent, and then we had hot chocolate, and we were safe. We took refuge in this little cabin. It also turned out to be the home of some porcupines who weren't there when we were, but there were lots of quills, and so we had porcupine quills as part of our family stuff for years. But it was quite exciting and wonderful, and we got safe. And that's the image that always comes to mind for me about refuge in the Buddha Dharma and Sangha. It's not light. It's not a trivial thing, because the instability of life is anything but a trivial thing. Right? It really is utterly out of control, and these bodies inevitably get sick, grow old, decay, and die. And every relationship ends in separation or death. And those words are one thing, but if we take them into our hearts and reflect on it a little bit, whoa, what does that really mean? And what it really means is everything and everyone that I really love, I will either say goodbye to or they'll vanish. Or I'll vanish suddenly and never see them again. So if we were to look around this room, one of the simple practices is everyone in this room is going to die. Whew. It's not a thought it's not common on CBS and NBC and Fox. Here's fair and balanced news. Folks, it's really true. News flash, we're realizing the facts. So if that's true, how is it that we don't remember? And part of us does remember, and that's the root of most of our anxiety. Because we say things like, bye honey, drive carefully. That's not what's really happening. What's really happening is, I know you're driving in a tin box at high speed, and I'm very attached to you, and I love you, and I so hope I see you again. So, anicca, impermanence, dukkha, the tremendous and ubiquitous suffering of human life, that we have our distractions and our addictions and our consolation prizes, but they're all consolation prizes because the fact is we're going to dissolve. These are the three characteristics of existence from the Buddha's teaching. The third is this vastly misunderstood teaching of anatta, not soul. We live in a culture, most of the world is this way actually, in which there's an spoken or unspoken belief that there's something in me that's going to last forever. It's either going to go in the religion of my childhood to heaven or to hell, or to purgatory or to limbo. Those were the options when I was a kid in Catholicism. And then in the traditional Buddhist teachings, well, this something that's me is going to get born into another life and another life. And some people actually find that comforting. Doesn't comfort me much. And I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not certain that's what the Buddha taught at all. But whatever the fact, what I do know is that this moment conditions the next moment, conditions the next moment, conditions the next moment, right in this lifetime. So it behooves me to be kind and good and loving and to be generous and also to practice waking up. One traditional way that we would take refuge would be to, quote, become a Buddhist. That I will chant this chant, I will think on these thoughts, and I'll remember them, and that will make me part of a religious river, one of the great rivers of spiritual understanding that's coming with human beings. Something like 750 million people use the Buddhist archetypal, mythological story as their basis for meaning. And you can come in. And that can be incredibly useful. It's here at PIMC in this experiment that we're conducting, it's not so much that one would become how many people in this room think of yourself as a Buddhist? So, small minority. What are you all doing here? This is a Buddhist meditation center. You've got the wrong address. The way I've come to understand, and I hope I'm not leading us all astray, but refuge in the Buddha means at its root refuge in that which Siddhartha Gautama experienced and became, which was awake, which meant no longer identified with all the human attachments. I don't think he became a zombie who didn't have feelings or emotions. I think he became instead a person with extraordinary awareness who would notice any thought or emotion or impulse that arose without fail. That he didn't get lost in the trance states of past and future and so on. He was just there. The person that I believe, and how would one know, but the person that I encountered in my life who seemed to me to epitomize the most awakeness was a monk named Tangpulu Sayadaw that I went to Burma in 1979. We got in for a week, my first wife and I. And we shaved our heads and took novice ordination and spent 6 days in intensive practice. While that intensive practice was happening, Tangpulu Sayadaw was doing this. He would get up with the rest of us at 4:30 in the morning, or 5 maybe, and then there'd be chanting, and then he would, about 7 o'clock or 7:30, start meeting with the townsfolk of Rangoon. And they would wait outside, and they'd come in ones and twos and fives and groups, and he would be with them. And he would be with them until around 11:30 when the one meal of the day happened. And then he'd disappear for a while, and then around 1:30 or 2, he would start meeting it with the townsfolk of Rangoon, and did that till 9 o'clock at night. He was 82 years old. He did that day in and day out for 3 months while he was in Rangoon. A fountain of selfless service. Quite interesting. He was a person who at age 12 went into a cave and was there for 28 years. Right? The townspeople took care of him, obviously, but he did 28 years of incredibly profound practice and then devoted his life to service. That was pretty selfless, seemed to me. So I'm not suggesting we do that, but what an amazing thing that awakening leads to caring for each other. So Siddhartha Gautama, North India, 2,600 years ago, something happened to him where his life became like that. And thousands, tens of thousands of people came to him and had profound experiences. Many, I guess we could say most people of the communities around him were not impressed. Right? It wasn't like everybody got into it. In fact, there was plenty of war going on at the time of the Buddha. When he died, he was in transit because his I have to be careful not to get into too much history, but his benefactor, King Bimbisara, who he'd been staying the rainy seasons with for 28 years or something, Bimbisara's son killed Bimbisara because it was time for him to be on the throne. And he kicked the Buddha out. So the Buddha was on the road at age 82, going somewhere that he never made it because he died of eating bad meat. So, and there was war going on. So, refuge in the Buddha, I suggest we think of it as, there's the stories and the history, and it's wonderful to know all that. And my experience in Asia was very faith-inducing. But the real faith, which means knowing that something works, like the faith in gravity, I have great faith that if I open my fingers, this will drop. Yep, again. I have great faith that remembering to be aware will reduce suffering. Every time awareness opens and notices, oh, poor me, this isn't happening, or I don't want that to happen. Oh, there's that. That's the human condition. But fortunately, it doesn't have to change. It can just be seen for what it is, which is, it's a remarkable display that's happening in consciousness. Refuge in the Buddha. I just remembered I put this picture of Ruth Dennison, my teacher of 40 years, up again yesterday. It's intended for the framing shop, but I'm so lucky to have known her. She passed away last February. Quite a pioneer and remarkable educator of human beings. she would like it that we're sitting here doing this. She would like it. Please look on your way out, turn around and look at the brass plaque above the door. That brass plaque there is there for a particular reason, that when she wrote the first check for $10,000, first of many, to create the center and said, here, start a center. And I said, I don't know how. She said, darling, I considered giving you the money DOD, which means delivery on death. But I wanted to see my name on something. So Ruth Denison Dhammadina, which was her Buddhist name, given to her by Tangpulu Sayadaw, the Dhammadina, Ruth Denison Dhammadina Meditation Hall. So she'd be happy that we're doing this. Refuge in the Buddha, in being awake, in remembering. Refuge in the Dharma. There's a remarkable compendium of teachings, an amazingly interlocked, elegant jewel of methodologies for how to wake up, which include examining our worldview, examining our intentions and our plans, being conscious about our speech and livelihood and speech, behavior, livelihood, and then the meditation. What effort can we make that will set us free? There's so many efforts we can do, right? We can clean up our diet, and we can eat only this or never that, and we can effort to be strong or to be very intellectual or to be physically fit, all these efforts. And we can also do incredible efforts internally. And what the Buddha proposed for us to experiment with is, it's the effort to recognize states of mind that are leading to suffering and to restrain them. And when they're gone, to keep them gone. And states of mind, qualities of mind that lead to happiness and freedom and to bring them into being. And when they're up, to keep them going. And notable among those internal capacities are, no surprise, mindfulness, awareness, this mysterious capacity of being awake, and concentration, which is the mind's ability to focus on something and stay there. And so with this knowing and this focus, called the wings of awakening, we start paying attention to our lives very in macro and in micro. And we carry out the experiment. Is there anything permanent? Can I find something permanent? Can I find anything that actually leads to lasting satisfaction that I can experience through my eyes, my ears, my nose, my tongue, my feeling body, or the mind? And the really remarkable one, can I find a self? Can I find myself? And interestingly, or strategically, or intentionally, what happens in this quest is we not only discover, oh, everything's disappearing, but there's a whole other order of experience which is free. But we get there through looking for something that's permanent. There's a profound intuitive understanding of awakeness. And I just remembered something. I missed it yesterday. I have a prop. Would you push it somewhere else? Remember Newton? Good old Newton, father of the Industrial Revolution. An object in motion tends to remain in motion unless acted upon by an outside force, including bowling balls, including human lives. A sperm and an egg come together, fertilization happens, birth happens, and then we are in the clutches of a family and a culture. And we are conditioned, and we're kind of fired out of the canon of our family of origin with beliefs about ourselves and the world, with a worldview, which is always somewhat contorted, somewhat to very contorted. We have childhood trauma. We have just what the culture expects of a man and a woman. We have political, it's so sad for our children. They grow up in families that believe in politics and therefore get onto opposite sides. I think one of the saddest little videos I ever saw was of children in northern and southern, old now, children in northern and southern Ireland being taught by their parents to hate the other side, which of course is what we do with the whole nationalist madness around the world. So, back to, it takes some effort to dislodge ourselves from the ballistic trajectory we're on out of our family, and that's the place of education, and then, if we're really lucky, of spiritual practice. Because spiritual practice asks the question at the most profound level. These are what I think of as my beliefs. Do I believe them? This is the ideology that this mind kicks up. Do I believe this? We encounter someone, and the prejudiced, the racist, the genderist, whatever the bias is, it comes up, and it's noticed when there's mindfulness. And then we can ask ourselves, how did I ever get to believe this? But we can only do that if we're awake. And there are three primary delusions. And these are: things are or could be permanent. I could have enough money to be safe. I could have enough gated community. I could have enough spirulina and whatever it is, that could get me safe. Second one, satisfaction, real lasting satisfaction is possible. If I just could get to the mall often enough, or have the right partner, or if I just had a different parentage, right? It would be so great to have had a different family, which is it's a hallucination. And then thirdly, I have a self. I have a self, and I'm going to develop myself, and it's going to become stable. So that no matter what happens, I'll always be secure and at ease. Those are pretty deep delusions. And taking refuge in the Dharma has to do with taking refuge in the teachings, in the way of practice, but also more fundamentally, taking refuge in life exactly as it is. Accepting life as it is, which is impermanent, unstable, unsatisfying, really, and empty of itself. I've been around a little while. Chris is 69 at Christmas this year, and I was of that generation that I really thought we were going to end war in our lifetime. We were going to somehow or another, by dint of sincerity and good communication skills, we would end war. And it doesn't seem as though we've succeeded, and of course we won't, because we're dealing with a very complicated human consciousness that can easily fall into delusion. But what we can do, if we can't end war, we can end war in here, and we can end war between ourselves, or use ourselves to come to awakeness such that we don't further it. And we can also wake up to realize that it really is okay the way it is. Hard to say, hard to believe, isn't it? But this is the world. And the task is how to learn to live kindly, lovingly, joyfully, in spite of it all. And to do our part toward bringing good into the world. But to cease being at war with reality. So, refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, the way things really are: birth, sickness, old age, decay, death, having experiences I don't want, not having experiences I do want, being with people I don't want to be with, not being with the person or persons I want to be with. That's our lives. We get to be with the person we really want to be with, and something changes. And we've had a beautiful. I'm not saying don't enjoy. I'm saying enjoy really fully. But then it always shifts. It always changes. And our suffering comes from the demand that it stay the same. Refuge in the Buddha, refuge in the Dharma, refuge in the Sangha. Tangpulu Sayadaw. The teachings from the Buddha have come down through generation after generation of human beings who actually actualized them. Meditation hasn't been part of popular Buddhist culture in Thailand or Sri Lanka or Burma because the monks for the longest time didn't think lay people could handle meditation. And so what the lay people practiced was dana sila, the practice of generosity and the practice of moral and ethical behavior. And the impact of that on those countries is remarkable. To be in those countries, the generosity is stunning and the kindness is amazing. And of course, they are human beings, and as we see what's happening in Thailand now and in Burma, Myanmar, I guess it is now, human beings, we have a shadow side. But very potent, this teaching. About 120 years ago in Burma, a handful of forest monks got the idea that these teachings should be available to lay people. And one of them was Lady Sayadaw, who was Lady Sayadaw, Ubakin, Ruth Dennison, and now myself. That stream. And there are other streams that have come to us from the Mahasi Sayadaw, another lineage down through time, that have said, no, lay people can really do this. Lay people have always been able to do this, except it wasn't offered to them. So, we in this hall, if we were interested in the genealogy of our spiritual practice, there are thousands and thousands of people who have followed the teachers that bring this lineage to life here, who have learned to be happier, to suffer less, to be more generous, to be kinder, to be effective in their culture, to take better care of their families, to do all these things, and to have the experience that the Buddha had. To learn to live in that way, which is simply awake, which is as close as remembering, seeing. So that's another level of what refuge in Sangha means. It's in the community of practitioners who've actually done this. And of course, there are hundreds of millions. Hundreds of millions of people have sat just like this. I sat through so many Dharma talks in my early years. One of my teachers, whose name was Munindra, I can't even begin to imitate the speed with which he spoke. And you can hear, I think there's audio talks of him online. But he did these what I would call speed raps. And he'd go on for 2 hours and cover the entire Buddhist teaching. It was amazing. And of course, it was all going in. It's part of what emerges here. These teachings were first, the Buddha iterated them in North India. It spread like wildfire, and then it went to Sri Lanka 400 years after he died. Up until then, it was an oral tradition, memorized and passed on. And in Sri Lanka, it was written down with a stylus on baby palm leaves, which then turned black. And then they were tied up together and put in baskets, which is the 3 baskets, the Tripitaka of Buddhism. And then it came back to India, and it was translated into Pali, which is the official language of Theravadan Buddhism, and then into Sanskrit, and then into Chinese, and it's so this lineage has come down through time of these remarkable teachings. So it's not something that I have made up, and it's not something that you have to make up. We do each, however, have to operationalize it. And that's the effort of spiritual practice. Hurrying. How interesting. What's the hurry? Well, I want to get it all covered. So, another piece. What I'm going to do is to invite you to use this sheet that you have in a few minutes and to join me in these chants, which are ancient. They are, I like to remind us, not magic. And they have to do with, and they're in Pali, and there's the first part I've been talking about, the refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, but then there's this 5 precepts part at the bottom. And so part of the intention in taking refuge in precepts is our intentions matter. Our intention, when you drive down or up 66th, if you want to go to Mary's Little Flower Cafe, which I highly recommend down here to the left, it's very important that your intentions take you left. If you want to go to Interstate 205, you turn right. So having one's intentions clear is really helpful. And these precepts are a form of intention. And the fundamental, the floor of them is, I'd really like to get along with people. I'd like to live in such a way that I don't need to be frightened that I'm going to get caught in a lie, or that I won't overstep my bounds in some sphere so that chaos ensues. And they're rules of training rather than thou shalts. And the rules of training means that you can and most likely will experiment. And you'll, quote, break this. These are laws, the way that, just as gravity is a law, it always happens. If we go around lying to people, it makes us tense. It certainly makes a mess. So we can try one interesting experiment around speech. Gossip really doesn't work very well. And one way to experiment with that is the next time you speak ill of someone who's not there, pay attention the next time you meet that person. What happens? I spoke badly of them. And we could say, oh man, I'm so sorry, I badmouthed you to this other person, which is not so likely. And we have a wall. We cannot be intimate with that person, because to be intimate would mean I'm feeling kind of tense in my heart because I haven't been kind to you. So a way to avoid that is to not speak ill of others. Certainly is important what one puts in one's emails, isn't it? So, if we human beings did one precept and took it really seriously, the one of not killing other humans, the world would be a different place. We can refine that more, since we're not likely to be killing other humans, but we can refine that more, that let's do our best to minimize the killing that we do. To not kill unconsciously. And there's a positive statement to each of these, which is, in this case, the positive statement I wrote maybe 20 years ago or so. I aspire to become kind and of service to all beings. The opposite of taking lives is I'll be of service. The second one, I undertake the rule of training to refrain. To refrain from taking that which is not freely given, which is a diabolical wording, because whenever our greed factor is up and I want it and I'm taking it, but what if it really isn't freely given? What if I'm having to violate my ethical code in order to take this, even if it's a small thing? So it's a consciousness raiser. I aspire to become generous to all beings. The foundation of a spiritual life, generosity, moral and ethical behavior, and training the mind. And generosity is all about this. Oh, we could use something small. This pick is cool. It says cool on it. Guitar pick. Watch what happens inside you as I do this. This is mine. Something trivial like this, right? Or, this is ours. If you need it, it's yours. This is in the movement of nature and in the movement, in the direction of the way things are, because nothing is ours. We get to use a few things for a little while, but then they always pass on. So generosity, worthy of cultivation. Third one, I undertake the rule of training to refrain from sexual acts which cause harm. I talked with a group yesterday at length about this. That energy of reproduction is really powerful, of course. That's why we're here. And so we can make a mess with it, and we do. So this stands as kind of a bulwark. How conscious can I be? How intentional can I be to use this amazing energy and to use it to bring love into the world? Fourth, I undertake the rule of training to refrain from false and harmful speech, gossip, slander, because it doesn't work. Have you ever lied in some, let's say, fairly large way, and then it turned into an absolute mess? Please raise your hand if you've had that experience. Right. Oh, 2 hands. So, having to remember what you said to whom, and oh man, covering your tracks, it's just so awful. So, speech, kind, gentle, loving, intentional, at the right time. My usual plug for Marshall Rosenberg. If you want to learn how to really speak your truth lovingly and get things done interpersonally, Marshall Rosenberg and compassionate communication or nonviolent communication, a modern, very effective modality. Our teacher Doyle is an expert in NVC, teaching it and training people in it. And yes, the last one. I undertake the rule of training to refrain from the use of intoxicants. Why? Well, the traditional intoxicants tend to reduce inhibition and have us indulge in the things the other precepts are supporting, stopping. They also provide a way to stay out of contact with reality. You know, I smoked my share of marijuana for more than a decade, almost daily. And why? Well, what happened when I stopped was I discovered that I was really depressed. And then, because I knew that I was depressed, I could do something about it. I got into therapy finally. And I also discovered that the pharmaceutical use of an antidepressant was very helpful. And then there's the argument, well, how can you use one and not the other? And the question is, what really works? What allows one to turn toward the dukkha and wake up in it? And it's intoxicants. I opine, we have no idea the damage that's being done to our children by these insidious devices. They hardly know how to relate to each other in some circumstances now. It's 2 years ago or so, I have a very remarkable, beautiful, intelligent stepdaughter, socially capable to the max. And parties, 13 girls, midnight, 13 cell phones, FaceTiming with someone, everyone's on their phone. They're in the hot tub, they're all on their phone, Snapchatting, and it's like, when do we put it down and be with each other? And what's it doing to consciousness? Pretty strange. As you can see, I have a little energy on the topic. I have a rule in my car. I'm a stepdad, so I don't have the clout that I would as a parent. But the one place that I have absolute control, when you get in my car, you turn off your phone. No, you don't put it in airplane mode. You turn it off. Because then you're disconnected and you might talk to me. I am not a chauffeur. I am a parent taking you to this mall. Rant. I don't like rap music much either. By golly, they found something I don't like. I kept trying. That's actually not quite true, but oh dear. So, refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Simply knowing of this can be helpful, and there's a ceremonial way of taking the precepts that we can do. And so, let me see, we got time for this. Let's do this first. Could I have the music sheet, please? I invite you to join me in song. Psalm number 1. The fingers are cold. Ugh. I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and love. Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community of mindful harmony. Namo Sanghaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Sanghaya. Yes, we have Buddha. All right, and now to tradition. I am going to do the traditional bowing to the Buddha, which is from my Asian tradition. This Buddha object, this is no more sacred than this light. It stands for something. It's a symbol for something. And when one bows toward it, it's bowing toward that for which it stands, which is the Buddha. So if you want to join me in the bowing, not required, Asian practice, please do. I'm going to go back there, bow 3 times to the Buddha, and then turn back and face you, and we'll do the chants together. So this is how one would do it if one were Thai. First is I take refuge in the Buddha, and then the Dharma, and then the Sangha. Oops. We'll do the homage and refuge only in Pali. And you'll notice there's dutiyampi, which means for the second time, and tatiyampi, which means for the third time. And the meaning, homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Homage to that which is awake. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami. And now the precepts. We'll do the Pali part, call and response, and then the English together. Panatipata veramani. Sikapadam samadhiyami. And now together. I undertake the rule of training to refrain from taking the life of any living being. I aspire to become kind and of service to all beings. Adina dana veramani. Sikapadam samadhiyami. I undertake the rule of training to refrain from taking that which is not freely given. I aspire to become generous to all beings. Kamesu micha chara. Veramani sikapadam samadhiyami. I undertake the rule of training, cause harm. I aspire to nurture love, relationship, and beauty. Musa wada veramani. Sikapadam samadhiyami. I undertake the rule of training to refrain from false and harmful speech. I aspire to use speech to create happiness, harmony, and understanding. Sura meraya maja. Pamadatana. Veramani sikapadam samadhiyami. I undertake the rule of training to refrain from the use of intoxicants. I aspire to cultivate mindfulness and wisdom. Another word on the precepts. They're not puritanical shaming devices, they're consciousness-raising devices. They're aspirations, they're a direction. Wild creatures in the gap. Before the kids come in, let me invite you to our community meeting, the first in several years, next Sunday at 1 o'clock. And please come. This is your community. You own this place. It's a nonprofit. And your input is of great importance. The community is burgeoning, growing like crazy. We have a new, very empowered fundraising committee. We have new teachers, the next generation of teachers who are online. And you can be as much a part of it as you want. Similarly, volunteering. There's lots of stuff to do around here, and you could do one small thing and your sense of belonging just skyrockets because it's actually you're dusting your windows or whatever it is. So, is there anything else I must mention, Kate? Matt McTighe, wonderful human being, will be meeting with 3 people in here. You can sign up at the back. Oh yeah, talent night. It's Saturday, next Saturday night. It's any talent you have. It could be a poem, a song, show and tell. I made this in my pottery class. It's just
5-ish minutes because lots of people want to share. So plans are set, but if there's not as many people, we can share for longer. So we'll see how many people show up. But
great.
Saturday night at 7 here. And hospitality.
There's food and goodies and kind people having hospitality. Yes. Yeah. And as you can tell from my beginner guitar playing, I'm going to sing a couple of songs. So you don't need to be ashamed if you're not particularly proficient. just bring yourself. And if you don't want to share something, just come and be part of it. All right, thank you for listening to all this morning. I hope it turns out to be very fruitful to all of us, and may all beings benefit from our practice. Let's let the wild creatures in. Let's form a large circle around the periphery. Excuse me, I forgot something up here. Thanks. Whoa. All right. May I hold your hand? Thank you. May I hold your hand? Thank you. I have an idea. Let's look around at all the grown-ups that are around us holding hands too. Just take a moment to look at them. Aren't we lucky they're all here? And we're so lucky you're here. Thank you, Monica. Our minds can think anything, and do. So why not think a kind thought, a blessing sort of thought, even a prayer, and give the hand on your right a little squeeze and wish this person well. May you be happy. May your Dharma practice call to you. May you remember your extraordinary capacity of compassion and generosity. And the person on your left, give their hand a little squeeze. Hands. What an incredible gift. So using this same heart mind, form a blessing for this person. If we're wishing a person well, we can't very effectively be wishing them ill. And so around our circle, hand to hand, heart to heart, let us send this loving wish to everybody in our circle, and to let our circle include the hands of our loved ones who aren't here, our friends, our colleagues. There are 6 or 7 billion of us here on the earth with hands, human hands. Let us wish all of us well. And then all of our brothers and sisters of the air, the earth, and the waters. May all beings everywhere remember to remember their true great nature. And in our somewhat local world, this imagination we call the United States, let's remember to have our hearts open to everyone of all political stripes, of all attitudes, of all behaviors. That we don't need to close our hearts to anyone. We do need to act, or we can choose to act, to bring more kindness and love into the world, but we don't need to, it doesn't help us to be motivated by hatred or superiority or fear. Just to remember we are all utterly interconnected. Okay, do we have singers? Yay, you're the man. Here you go.
May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Wow, thank you. Beautifully done. All right. We now come to the ancient ritual passed down generation after generation since the Buddha, making the wish and blowing out the candle. Are we all ready?
Yes.
Ready? Remember the count. 1, 2, 3, blow. Yes, we did it again. Thank you for joining us on the internet. And thank you, everybody here. And come and have some goodies and see you next week.